May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our light and our freedom. Amen. Please be seated. I'm sure we've all had those days when we wake up and we make a plan to accomplish all the tasks on our long to-do list, and even feel eager and energized to do it. But then unexpected things and interruptions come up that require our attention and energy and time. And then we realize at the end of the day that we did not accomplish anything from our original list. In fact, our list has just gotten quite a bit longer. I'm not the only one who has that experience, am I? No. It seems that often the day that I had planned for myself was not the day that God had planned for me. It was Woody Allen who appropriately said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. Now, I do still believe that God is deeply interested in and glorified by all the plans that we try to make, or at least most of the plans we try to make, especially when our plans involve trying to worship and serve Him and serve others. However, I have found that sometimes the real ministry is in the interruptions to our plans. Sometimes God's glory shows up in our lives as an unexpected disruption that requires us to let go of the plans we had made for the day, or for the week, or for the month, or maybe for the whole year. This is one of the major insights and revelations offered on this feast of the Epiphany, which is the feast of the revelation of God's glory in unexpected places, through unexpected people, and to unexpected people. The insight of Epiphany invites us to indeed keep making our plans, but to always hold them lightly and always let them be at God's disposal. I imagine Mary had other plans for her day and for her entire life when the archangel Gabriel appeared to her and told her that she would give birth to the Son of God. I imagine the shepherds in Bethlehem had other plans for their night when the hosts of heaven filled the sky and told them about the birth of the Messiah in a manger. And we know that most of Christ's followers had other plans in mind for the gospel when that rogue apostle Paul interrupted them with what he called the plan of the mystery hidden for the ages, which we just read about in Ephesians. Most of Christ's followers believed that the gospel was intended only for the Jews, but God's plan was much bigger, according to Paul, who so audaciously ruined any plans of exclusive access to Christ, exclusive access to what Paul calls the boundless riches of Christ. Christ, whom he saw as the fulfillment of that ancient prophecy of Isaiah, who said, as we just heard this morning, all nations, or all Gentiles, shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and they shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. This is what Epiphany is all about. God's big plan bursting open our small plans. And the Feast of the Epiphany actually honors 3 biblical events in which the new wine of God's uncontainable glory breaks open the old wineskin of our small-minded plans and ideas. One of these events is Christ's first miracle, when he miraculously brings more wine to a party, thus revealing his glory through sensuous delight and apparent excess. The other Epiphany event, the baptism of Christ, almost didn't happen at all because it didn't seem to fit within the plans of John the Baptist, who understandably couldn't comprehend why he would be the one to baptize the Messiah. And the third Epiphany event, which we most often associate with the feast, is the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy, which we read about in the Gospel of Matthew, the visit of the kings from the east, bearing gifts of gold and frankincense. And we actually don't know all that much about these Eastern visitors called the Magi, except that they were generally understood to be followers of an ancient Persian religion called Zoroastrianism, and they were believed to have spiritual power through a special esoteric knowledge of alchemy and astrology. In fact, the word magician has etymological roots with the word magi. I was thinking about this during Christmas break as Ashley and I watched all of the Harry Potter films, and I imagined Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore and Hermione Granger as modern-day descendants of these ancient magi. The magi certainly spark, at least my imagination. And there's likely an etymological connection between the word imagination and the nation of the Magi, the Magi nation. About a century ago, the imagination of an English minister named Henry Van Dyke was sparked by the Magi, especially when he learned that according to extra-biblical tradition, the wise men were understood as primarily three men named Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. Henry Van Dyke studied Zoroastrianism and then steeped his prayerful imagination in the nation of the Magi. And by immersing himself in the Magi nation, Van Dyke began to imagine a fourth wise man named Artaban. He said that while studying the curious tales of the three wise men, he began to see Artaban distinctly moving through the shadows in a little circle of light. He then says, the narrative of Artaban's journeys and trials and disappointments ran without a break. Even certain sentences came to me complete and unforgettable, clear-cut like a cameo. All that I had to do was to follow Artaban step by step as the tale went on within his prayerful imagination. Henry Van Dyke wrote about Artaban in his book, The Story of the Other Wise Men. In this story, Artaban was initially planning to join Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar on their journey to Bethlehem. And just as the three wise men brought gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, Artaban was planning to bring his own gift of 3 jewels, a ruby, a sapphire, and a pearl. However, God apparently had other plans for Artaban. As he was on his way to meet with the others, he came across a sick man dying on the side of the road. By choosing to take the time to care for this sick man in need, Artaban ended up missing his opportunity to travel with the others and visit the Christ child, bring him the gifts. By the time Artaban eventually did arrive in Bethlehem on his own, the other wise men had already left, and so had Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, who had escaped to Egypt to escape the massacre of the Holy Innocents. So Artaban then decided to remain in Palestine for several decades, hoping to someday meet this Jesus. Although he did not find Jesus, Artaban encountered many other people in desperate need of his care. As Henry Van Dyke writes, in all this populous and intricate world of anguish, though he found none to worship, he found many to help. He fed the hungry and clothed the naked and healed the sick, and his years passed swiftly. And in order to protect and help others in need, Artaban had to end up selling the sapphire and ruby that were intended as gifts for Jesus. And one day, after 33 years, Artaban was walking through the streets of Jerusalem and overheard some Parthian Jews talk about going to Golgotha to see the execution of a man named Jesus of Nazareth. When he heard this, his heart leapt within him, and he thought, wow, the ways of God are stranger than the thoughts of men. And it may be that I shall find the king at last in the hands of his enemies, and shall come just in time to offer my pearl for his ransom before he dies. So he's so full of excitement, he starts following the crowd to Golgotha. And as he's following the crowd to Golgotha, he once again is interrupted by the sight of a young woman who is being dragged down the streets by soldiers. And when the young woman sees him looking at her, she broke away from her tormentors and threw herself at Artaban's feet and cried out, "Please have pity on me. My father is dead, and I am seized for his debts to be sold as a slave. Please save me from worse than death." Artaban was deeply conflicted, once again interrupted, and eventually resigned to what felt to him like yet another failure, another interrupted plan. He gave the young girl his pearl and said, "This is your ransom, daughter. It is the last of my treasures which I kept for the king." And at that moment, there was a terrible earthquake, and a heavy tile fell from a roof and struck Artaban hard on the head, knocking him down. As the young girl comforted him and held him in her arms, Artaban finally saw Jesus, who appeared to him in glorious light and said to him, "Truly I tell you, Artaban, whatever you did to the least of these, you did unto me." And after hearing these words, a calm radiance of wonder and joy lighted the pale face of Artaban like the first ray of dawn on a snowy mountain peak. A long breath of relief exhaled gently from his lips. His journey was ended. His treasures were accepted. The other wise man had found the king. Artaban's praiseworthy plans to honor Christ with his gifts were disrupted by God's plan for Artaban to share those gifts with those who were in desperate need. Sometimes the real ministry is in the interruptions to our plans. Sometimes God's glory shows up in our lives as unexpected disruptions that require us to let go of the plans we made for the day, for the week, or for the month, for the year, maybe for our life. Joseph Campbell said, "Sometimes we must let go of the life we had planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us." On this feast of the Epiphany and throughout this season of Epiphany Tide, may we all continue to make our plans individually and together, but always hold them lightly and be ready to put them aside in order to welcome God's plan for us. And like Artaban, discover in the interruptions the radiant glory of our King. Amen.